students, welcome back to our video sessions in class 10 biology. In this video, we will be starting a new chapter, that is chapter 7 in your textbook, coordination in life processes. So in our previous videos and previous lessons, we have learned about control and coordination. There we studied about movement, balance and coordination. We studied about how nervous system is helping in coordination. We also learned about coordination without the involvement of nerves, that is the endocrine system. Now the human body is something more beyond that. The human body is a complex organization. There are so many life processes going on in the human body. The processes which are essential for the body to sustain life, they are called the life processes. Example, respiration, circulation, digestion, excretion, etc. So these processes without which the body cannot survive is called life processes. Now these life processes require various organs and organ systems. They have organs and organ systems. Each organ system is integrated with the rest of the body. So in other words, we can say that these life processes are an integrated network. There is an integration among all these processes. So in this lesson, we are going to study about how complex the human body is and how this integration is happening in order to sustain a healthy body and a healthy life. The human body is a wonderful machine. So many processes are involved in the human machine, and each process is dependent or linked to other processes. And the whole body is always in balance. There is regulation also. So to understand this integration, let us take one example of the digestive system and let us see how it is integrated with other processes in the body. So the digestive system consists of the alimentary canal. We call that the alimentary canal. Starts with the mouth, followed by the esophagus. There is a stomach, there is a liver and pancreas, followed by the duodenum. Then there is a small intestine and the large intestine, and the alimentary canal ends in the anus. Digestion starts with the mouth and it is finished, it is completed, ended in the anus. What makes you feel hungry? Why are we hungry? What is hunger? It is that feeling of rumbling sensation in your stomach when the stomach is empty. So what makes your stomach go rumbling and give you that pain called the hunger pangs? Why do you get hunger pangs? This is because of the circulatory system where the blood is showing low levels of nutrients, especially glucose. Glucose is the energy currency of the cell. So end stage of digestion will always result in glucose, which gives us energy, and we call glucose as the energy currency of the cell. So when glucose levels in the blood are low, then the stomach starts secreting a hormone called ghrelin. This hormone sends signal to the brain. The vagus nerve and the diencephalon are responsible for carrying this signal. And finally, we feel the hunger pangs in the stomach. So now you understand that the digestion in the stomach is related to the circulatory system, because low levels of glucose have given a signal to the stomach, and the stomach has secreted a hormone called ghrelin, and this has involved the nervous system in creating the hunger pangs. So this example has given you an idea of how one process is integrated with the other process. The next example is the taste and smell. Taste and smell are two different senses. They are from different receptors on different organs. But still, taste and smell, those senses, they are interrelated. How do we know they are interrelated? For example, you have a person whose sense of smell is impaired or the sense of smell is lost. The food tastes different, or the taste of the food may not be as much as it is for another person, in the person whose smell is impaired. So when we have some cold, we don't have the sense of smell, then the food will taste different. So from this we can say that the sense of taste and smell are interrelated. What happens when we have food with good flavor? So the chemicals in the food, when they touch the tongue, they touch papillae on the tongue. Papillae are bulb-like projections that are there on the small bumps that are there on the surface of the tongue. These papillae have cells called taste buds. So when the chemical in the food goes on to these taste buds, the sensory nerves carry the information to the brain, specifically to the brain stem, which is the medulla oblongata. And when the odor, the chemicals in the air, airborne chemicals, when they reach the nose and when they reach the receptors in the nostrils, the sense is carried to the olfactory lobes in the brain. We already have studied about the olfactory lobes, which is in the forebrain on the ventral side. So the information that has reached the olfactory lobes and the information that has reached the brain stem, both are processed together, and then we get flavor of the food. We get the flavor that experience is a combination of taste and smell.
Smell influences taste and taste influences smell. Let us understand this with the help of a small activity. Try holding your nose while eating something. Your taste buds will be able to tell something to your brain about the food that you are eating, but you may not get the exact flavor of it. So what happens when you are eating? Food releases chemicals that travel up to the nose, where chemicals trigger olfactory receptors in the nose. They work together with your taste buds to create a true flavor. Sight is technically not a part of taste, but it influences perception. Eating a piece of chocolate sends a positive signal to the brain receptor and lets you know you are enjoying it. So this comes from a mixture of sight, touch, and smell. So we always prefer the food material which is attractive to our eyes and adds flavor to our nose, and then only we taste it. So without our knowledge, actually we use sight, nose, and the tongue for selecting food for ingestion. Russian scientist Pavlov conducted experiments and found that even the thought of food will water the mouth. This experiment he conducted in dogs. The unconditioned response is the dog's natural salivation on seeing and smelling food. The unconditioned stimulus was the sight or the smell of food. The conditioned stimulus was the ringing of bell, which had no relationship to the food, and the conditioned response was salivation in response to the ringing of the bell. We also need to understand that taste can be identified easily when the tongue is pressed against the palate. So, as we press the tongue against the palate, the taste buds with openings on the top, they are having sensitive cells and they get pressed. So, the food on the tongue gets dissolved in the saliva secreted by the salivary glands. So when the tongue is pressed against the palate, food substance is pressed against the opening of the taste bud, and therefore it is allowing it to reach the taste cells and trigger the taste signals. So therefore taste is recognized in the brain. Since we are talking about taste, we need to take a look at the mouth, which is involved in tasting. Mouth is an oval shaped cavity inside the skull. It has two main functions. One is eating and other one is speaking. The parts of the mouth include the lips, vestibule, mouth cavity, gums, teeth, hard and soft palate, tongue, and the salivary glands. The mouth is also known as oral cavity or buccal cavity. The digestive tract begins at the mouth. Digestion starts when food is taken into the mouth. It is ground up by the teeth and it is moistened with the saliva. This is called mastication. Grinding of the food with the help of teeth is called mastication. Saliva has an enzyme called salivary amylase that starts to break down carbohydrates into simple sugars. Movement of the tongue helps to push the wet mass of food to the back of the mouth. Muscles of the mouth are also helping in this process. So at the back of the mouth, food can be swallowed. There is a flap of skin called epiglottis which is closing the windpipe, and it will ensure that the food is directed into the esophagus. Let us look at the anatomy of the mouth or the parts of the mouth. The main structures of the mouth include the lips. They are two mobile muscular structures. They are forming the entrance of the mouth. Then we have the vestibule. Vestibule is the space between the soft tissue and the teeth. That is, the space between lips and teeth, or the space between cheeks and teeth. Vestibule is kept moist by secretions from the parotid salivary gland, which is located in front of the ears and behind the angle of the jaw. The next part is the mouth cavity. Mouth cavity is having several structures. There are arches, alveolar arches, which are bony structures. These arches, they contain the teeth. The arches surround the mouth cavity in the front and on the sides. On top, there is hard and soft palate, and below there is a tongue. The mouth cavity is kept moist by secretions from submaxillary and sublingual salivary glands. Submaxillary and sublingual salivary glands are located in the floor of the mouth, that is under the tongue. The next part is the gums. Gums are made up of fibrous, dense tissue. They line the alveolar arches and they are holding on to the teeth. Next, we have to understand the teeth. Figure to understand the arrangement of teeth. One of the strongest parts of the body. They are made from proteins such as collagen and minerals such as calcium. They help us to chew food. Even the toughest foods, they are helping us to chew properly. They also allow us to speak clearly. Most adults have 32 teeth, which are called permanent teeth. They are also called secondary teeth, which consists of 8 incisors, 4 canines, 8 premolars, 12 molars. Children have just 20 teeth called primary teeth or temporary teeth. They are also called milk teeth. They include the same 10 teeth in the upper and lower jaw, which consist of 4 incisors, 2 canines, and 4 molars. Primary teeth start to erupt through the gums when the baby is around 6 months old. The lower incisors are usually the first primary teeth to come. Most kids have all 20 of their primary teeth by the age of 3. Children will lose their primary teeth between the ages of 6 and 12. They are then replaced by permanent teeth. Molars are usually the first permanent teeth to come in. Most people have all their permanent teeth in place by the age of 21. What are incisors? The 8 incisors are located in the front part of your mouth. You have them 4 in the upper jaw and 4 in the lower jaw. They are shaped like small chisels. They have sharp edges that help us to bite into the food. We use incisor teeth when we bite into something. So, incisors are usually the first set of teeth to erupt at about 6 months of age. What are canines? There are 4 canine teeth next to the incisors. 2 canines are on the top and 2 canines are on the bottom. They have sharp, pointy surface for tearing the food. The first baby canines come between the age of 16 months and 20 months. Upper canines will grow first and then the lower canines. What are premolars? There are 8 premolars. They are present next to the canines. 4 premolars on top and 4 on the bottom. Premolars are bigger than canines and incisors. They have a flat surface with ridges for crushing and grinding food into small pieces, making it easier to swallow. Baby molar teeth are replaced by adult premolars. Infants and young children don't have premolars because these teeth won't come in until around the age of 10. What are molars? There are 12 molars and they are the biggest and strongest teeth. There are 6 on the top and 6 at the bottom. The main 8 molars are sometimes divided into 6-year and 12-year molars based on when they actually grow. The large surface area of the molar helps to grind food. When we eat, the tongue pushes the food to the back of the mouth, then molars will break up the food into small pieces, allowing us to swallow easily. The molars also have 4 wisdom teeth, which are the last set of teeth to grow. They usually come in the ages between 17 and 25. Wisdom teeth are also called third molars. Not everyone will have room in their mouth for this last group of teeth. Sometimes the wisdom teeth are stuck to the gums. They don't have space, so some people they will have that wisdom teeth removed. So all the 32 teeth are essential for biting and grinding up food. And teeth are also essential to speak clearly. What is saliva and what is its action on food? Saliva is the watery extracellular exocrine fluid that is secreted into the mouth. It is a watery substance. It consists of 98% water, but it has important components as well, like electrolytes, mucus, and enzymes are the important component of saliva. So, to understand the action of saliva in the mouth, we have an experiment. For this experiment, we will take a test tube filled with water and we will add a pinch of flour, little maida maybe, to it, and we will shake the test tube well till the flour gets mixed. So to this solution, we can add little bit of iodine, a drop of iodine solution or iodine tincture. What will happen is there is appearance of blue black color which will confirm the presence of starch. Maida has carbohydrates, so it is starch in the form of starch, so we will get a blue black color. Now for the second experiment, we will again take a test tube with water, add little flour to it, dissolve it properly. Now we will divide this solution into 2 equal halves in 2 test tubes. To one test tube, we will add saliva, and to another test tube, we will not add anything, keep it just like that. So these 2 test tubes are kept aside for 45 minutes.
After 45 minutes, iodine solution drops are added to both the test tube. What will we observe? We will observe that blue black color is seen in the test tube which did not have saliva. And the test tube which had saliva, we will not see blue black color. So, what does this indicate? Saliva acts on carbohydrates, breaking down them into simple sugars. So, starch is broken down into sugar. So, saliva in the test tube has converted the carbohydrate in the flour into simple sugars, and therefore, iodine did not give us a blue black color. So, from this, we can understand that the salivary amylase in the saliva acts upon starch, breaking it into smaller sugars. Salivary secretion is under the action of autonomous nervous system and is secreted by three pairs of salivary glands. They moisten the food and they make the food easy to swallow. So, as a result of chewing, food forms into a mass which is called bolus. It is this bolus that is transported into the esophagus by the action of swallowing, helped by the tongue. Swallowing is also under nervous coordination, and the control center for swallowing is present in the brainstem. What is pH and how is it important? pH is the negative logarithm to the base 10 of the hydrogen ion concentration. It is important because enzymes are active only at their optimum pH. So, in the mouth, the pH is maintained nearly neutral, and salivary amylase is able to act upon starch only because of this environment. Salivary amylase requires a pH of 6.2 to 7.6. So, this is the pH range which is maintained in the mouth, and therefore helping salivary amylase to act upon carbohydrates. We can check pH with the help of pH paper. The pH paper has a color chart, and the color change in the pH paper can be compared to the color chart to note down what pH it is.